as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day.
Became a nightmare. I'm gonna do a walkthrough.
Over 1,300 pieces of evidence were collected from the crime scene.
Scratch marks along the wall.
There was no doubt something paranormal was going on.
And for that exact reason, I'll continue my research to drive away the darkness.
All right, well, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. This is ASEP Radio. We're here at the Port Gamble Ghost Conference, and thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Ben Robinson, and this is Nicole Robinson.
Hello.
My lovely assistant. I'd like to start by saying when we wanted to do this show, we wanted to come up with something that was going to be entertaining for everybody and something that people can relate to. And I had the worst creative block, so I wanted to just give a quick shout out to my wife. She came up with this awesome idea of Hollywood and the paranormal, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So tonight, or today, let's...
And first of all, I want to say thank you guys for sticking around.
Yeah.
Because this is a very long weekend. We know you're tired and you want to get home. So thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you very much. So we have three guests today, Casey Goodwin, Michael White, and Kristen Gray. And thank you guys very much for being willing to be grilled today and give your opinions on Hollywood and the paranormal.
Thank you for having us.
So we kind of, time permitting, want to do two parts to the show. The first part, we're going to talk about Hollywood and how it depicts real cases, real people, the reality of it. And then if we have time, going into how Hollywood portrays perceptions of cases, perceptions of ghost hunters, and that stuff, and seeing where Hollywood is getting it right, where it's getting it wrong, maybe how we can help it go down a different path that's more realistic. So that's kind of the gist of today's show.
I'm just glad Rob Zombie's not doing any...
I should have
ghost
separated
hunting.
you two.
Leave my man alone, man. All right, so we're going to kind of talk about some famous movies or documentaries about real cases, events, and even people that were involved. The first movie I'd like to start with would be The Conjuring. And it was a hugely popular movie. You've all seen it, right?
Wait, that's the one with the nun?
No, the first one is Andrew
That's the second one.
story. It's the original one. It was based on her life growing up in the home.
Oh,
The parents.
I didn't
Yeah.
see that.
Get off the panel.
Give me the mic.
Kristen will carry this one.
Yeah, so it specifically kind of details out, well, at least in the movie, that is, what happens to Carolyn Perrin. And the way they portray it in the movie, well, I guess we'll start with you, Casey. What do you feel they did right with regards to portraying the family in that movie?
I hate to say this. I'm not a big fan of the Warrens.
Yeah.
So I don't follow any of their cases.
Okay, but you've seen the movie.
I have seen the movie.
Yeah.
I like the movie. I like the movie as a horror movie. I didn't
Right.
like the movie as a movie that portrayed paranormal research. However, I did like that they the way they had it set up with the, of course, the cameras and the motion sensors that would do the motion activated shots when there was a temperature fluctuation.
Right.
What? I think it's the microphone, not the person behind it. Thanks, Jay. I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, so I did like some of the setup. Whether or not they truly had that kind of a setup back then, who knows? But it looked good on camera.
Right.
And the thing that's interesting with The Conjuring, it it takes a real case, and it also portrays real paranormal investigators that we have. So it's doing kind of a twofold technique here.
What did you think, Kristen?
Well, I think they definitely made a Hollywood movie. I've spoken with Andrea about the case, and I have her story when they portray it in this movie. You look at this movie and you watch, and it looks like this event happened over 6 months. And really, this was 10 years that they lived in this house and these experiences that they had. So she's actually written 3 books on her life in this house, and they're huge. They're like this. Wow. But so the movie portrayed a Hollywood scary movie. A lot of it really didn't have what happened. If you read the books are actually way more terrifying than what happened in the movie. The things they experienced. Like I said, in the movie, it was just, I think they made it to be a scare factor movie and quick, and this is what it is. And I know that they actually are making a movie based on the books right now. Okay. So that'll be interesting to see how that comes out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I didn't see the movie, but had I actually watched that film, I would have the same opinion as they do.
That is an excellent point. Thank you. So, one of the things I thought that was interesting about The Conjuring in itself was that it kind of tackled a possession, and that's one of the big sellers in Hollywood, and often a go-to for movies because they're wanting to make money, and that makes, that sells. What are your opinions on the way Hollywood approaches a possession style incident?
I liked how it was approached on The Exorcist.
Okay.
It was very methodical, and it showed them, going to the church and going to the psychiatrist, going to the hospitals and having these tests done, and those are stages that are actually done when when a real case is looking at possible possession. Right. I mean, there are so many steps, and not just going in and exercising something.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. What about you, Kristen?
Well, I know, and
or Michael, either one of you.
I know, and just talking about The Conjuring and the possession there, that was one of the things that Andrea had actually said that kind of upset her with that movie, because she said that was one of the biggest falsehoods in that movie, was that her mother was never possessed. Her mother never tried to hurt them, so she was really actually upset with that they portrayed their mother in that light, that she was trying to kill them, right. And who wouldn't be. As far as movies that are based on exorcism, those are some of the movies I think that psychologically scare me the most. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because that's what I understand the least. And something I really don't want to delve into ever. But I think, like you said, a lot of them are Hollywoodized. So they're made for that fear factor. They're made to terrify you because, and you get in most people's heads and you start thinking about demons and possessions. That's scary stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that there's a series of expectations that Hollywood has to feed to keep the people who are interested in that genre. Because if you look back over historical records about possessions here and there, it generally isn't good. And if somebody actually turned around and made a movie where you took a person who was just an awful person in their life and then suddenly they became possessed and they got better, it would be a real hard sell.
I got better.
Public. Yeah.
I'm not bad.
Not dead yet.
Well, let's broaden it. Let's not just stick with exorcisms and possessions. Like, do you think it's possible for Hollywood to take a real case and be true to that case and it still sell?
My opinion is yes. There's things out there that could be intense and scary enough for that factor without having to magnify it. Sensationalize it. I mean, we've had cases that could be very interesting, movies without having to make them the fear factor in. But I think we as a society just love the gore and we love the thrill kind of that watching that scary movie brings in. So I think that's why a lot of people go towards doing the sensationalism, but I think it could be done without it.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of things that can occur that don't necessarily translate well to film. If in a real case, you know, you have bleeding walls and so forth. If you show that on film, you're not going to be too terrified, really. It's not going to be a scary film. If you were in that house and that started happening, it would be a different story altogether.
Right.
So to some degree, they do have to kind of twist it around so they're manipulating the viewer's emotions because bottom line, it's a product and, and it needs to sell.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, when you're immersed in it, you're feeling things with all your senses, where you don't have that when you're watching something on the film. So they have to kind of heighten it to get you to a state that you don't necessarily have to be that high if you're...
Cue the scary music.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Da-na-na.
So another famous film that was made about supposed events that took place, and it has been hotly debated, is the Amityville Horror, especially starting with the DeFeo family, and how when the Lutzes moved in and how everything went down for them. Do you feel like a story that has kind of been so sensationalized like that, do they do justice to what has been researched about that place at all in the movie?
I don't know if the research that's been done, how credible it is.
Right.
I think that the DeFeo case alone is more interesting than the actual haunting.
I would agree. I would definitely agree.
I read Ronnie DeFeo's book that he had wrote from his jail, and you know, he went back and forth so much with, you know, he heard voices, he didn't hear voices, you know, he did it because of this, it was drugs, it was I think they took, like you said, they had a story, and I think they took a story, and then I think maybe this family moved into this house that had this history. Was there some residual energy there? I don't know, but I think it was definitely sensationalized and made into something that was very, very profitable. Look, it was the 1970-something, and how many remakes are they on, like Amity 10 right now? I just watched one the other night that was a new Amityville one that was or another remake.
Oh, is that the one you're just referring to? Is it out already?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's on Prime Free or something, one of those.
Right.
I just know that Christopher Quarantino, who was actually one of the little boys who lived in the house, has been fighting tooth and nail that these movies not come out anymore because he's tired of a lot of the fabrication that's gone on. Even going back to the Jay Anson book on the Amityville Horror, which was all fabricated.
Right. Okay.
Are there any movies that you guys know of that are doing it right? Or as right as possible?
I always go back to Poltergeist. Now, I'm not saying that the entire movie is right, but when I got into the field, it was because of Poltergeist, and it was seeing the two characters, the two researchers, sitting at a table that had oscilloscopes and cameras, and they're just, they're listening to the audio in the house, and they're just observing the location. Mm-hmm. That was the kind of the catalyst for me, where I thought, like, holy crap, you can actually potentially set up equipment and record an event.
Right.
And that really kind of stuck with me.
And that's kind of how it was with the movie The Entity, too. I mean, it was...
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a dark movie, and if anybody's ever seen the movie, I mean, what this woman reportedly goes through, but seeing some of the science, having the teams come in, having her put in an isolation chamber, or, seeing some of the science stuff that they used to try to capture some of the things that were happening to her. And that was another one. That case was early 80s, late 70s, So.
Yeah, Doris Bythers was the main person on that case in Culver City. And it was a little bungalow. It was about an 800 or 900 square foot house.
Tiny place.
But what's interesting and where it kind of gets blurred is the whole Ron Silver portion of it. She was consulting a doctor, but the whole isolation chamber thing, that was all Hollywood.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I've talked with Barry Taff. We've had a couple conversations through Facebook over the years, and he even says, all the time that we spent there, he'd love to go back there and do it again, knowing what they know now on the psychology of the human mind, and see if, a lot of it can be explained just because of the psychology of the people involved.
Okay.
So even though it wasn't real, though, it's interesting still at that time frame that they were having these ideas of doing these experiments.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they believe, too, that she was the agent of the activity because it wasn't tied to the Culver City house. It actually supposedly followed her when she moved on to the next house and the next house, up until I think she passed away.
Well, I think it's interesting, and I wanted to do this topic because the paranormal is kind of everywhere nowadays. It's in TV shows, it's in movies. We're inundated with it, either ghosts or demons or psychics. It's kind of everywhere. So I kind of wanted to get a discussion going, like, is Hollywood doing us a service or a disservice? And
You mean in this field of research?
in what we do and what we're trying to do. What are your thoughts?
I think one of the disservices is that there are people who might expect a paranormal situation to look like the movies. Mm-hmm. So when they start describing it and they're contacting paranormal teams, it looks very much like a movie plot, a movie script, and especially when the things that they're saying is happening are very familiar as far as coming directly from a movie. So in that regard, it's kind of changing the perception of what the paranormal and paranormal research is all about, and I think in that regard, it is a disservice.
Okay.
Another movie I think got a lot of it right was the very first Paranormal Activity.
Yeah.
And it was the little subtle things in the movie that I think they got right. It wasn't like super outlandish until towards the end, but like you could hear the keys fall on the counter or fall off of the counter while they're sleeping, or there was those long shots of the corridor going out to the bathroom where you could see the light flicking on and then flicking off,
right?
Or the shadow figure that was kind of moving through, and you could see the footprints in the baby powder, and all of that. Things like that I thought were cool, and the fact that he took the initiative to set up security cameras and then go through the process of going through everything that he had recorded the night before, and to the point where he just got super obsessive about it. I think that that obsession kind of carries over into our work because we continue to do it.
Right.
I think it would be interesting to see if there was a correlation too, with, if somehow you could collect, data from other teams and see if there's a correlation between when these horror movies come out and spikes in case calls that come in, and what type of case calls come in, because it seems like everything after a movie comes out seems like we get an influx of demonic cases.
Yeah.
Everything's demonic after a Hollywood scary movie comes out. That's a big Hollywood.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you go back to The Exorcist and the whole Ouija board thing. I mean, a Ouija board was that was commonplace back before the movie came out in '73, and then all of a sudden they had introduced the possibility of demon possession because they're talking to somebody, and then all of a sudden nobody wanted to have it, and then all of a sudden all of these stories would come out about, my sister's friend's brother-in-law had a bad experience. He got in a car accident, but 4 months ago he played with a Ouija board, and then they found the connection, and that was what caused it.
And that gets in people's minds, and it stays in their psyche. Like, my husband to this date does not want a Ouija board in our house, and I keep trying to tell him, but I have a spirit, I have this. He's like, I don't care, I just don't want a Ouija board in the house. I'm like, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a communication tool.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I honestly feel like, when it comes to movies like, say, Paranormal Activity, they're really trying to get to the root and scare people, and they're tying right back into that whole demonic, force and energy that they are trying to sell to the mass public. And now then you have like The Exorcist and the Ouija board, and now everybody's got the stigma, when it comes to that. It definitely doesn't help with what we're trying to do in this field.
A funny one, speaking of Ouija boards, was when we had Robert Murch on Oregon Paranormal Radio. He was talking about a bunch of different superstitions, but what they call it at the talking board societies, they call them Ouija-stitions. And he said one that stemmed from the movie Ouija that he was a consultant on. It was written into the story where they would pick up a planchette and look through the little glass piece, and that's how you would see spirits. Well, of course, after that movie came out, now you see idiots on YouTube, and they're doing this before they start talking with the Ouija board. And now it's become part of how to use it.
Right. Are they also doing their chant?
Oh, yeah. I know the chant. I can't think of it at the moment. But wasn't that like? I think that originated from the movie Witchboard.
They were doing it in that Ouija movie that came out.
Yeah.
And it's just.
Have you seen Witchboard?
A long time ago.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
Yeah.
A lot of blood.
So kind of switching gears a little bit, not just always talking about ghosts or demons and all that stuff. Another movie that I personally liked a lot that was based on true events.
Ernest Goes to Camp.
Yes. How'd you know?
I know you, buddy.
He's psychic.
There's Fire in the Sky, which kind of chronicled or told the story about what happened to Travis Walton. What are your thoughts on, first off, you've seen Fire in the Sky, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I figured you did.
Of course.
Of course. Good. So what do you think they did right about that movie with regard to...
Oh, God, aliens are not my thing.
Okay.
So they could have got it all right for all I know.
Okay.
Or all wrong.
What about either one of you? Got any comment on that?
I've seen the movie, but it's been so long that I'm sitting here trying to remember. So go to Michael.
Well, this is bad because I did see that movie, and I remember seeing that movie for like the first 20 minutes of it, and I said, "You got to be kidding!" And I
shut it off.
Yeah, I watched something else.
Wow.
My biggest gripe with that movie is not the subject matter, but how the movie ended just super abruptly.
Mm-hmm.
That still makes me mad. I'm getting mad thinking about it.
Okay, we'll switch gears. That one didn't end up working out anyway, so we'll just.
Do you have Communion on your list?
We can talk about any movie.
Because Communion, that was a fun movie, but that was a complete hoax.
Yeah.
That was a Christopher Walken movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just like Christopher Walken, so I thought I'd watch it.
Yeah.
We should just go watch it.
Let's do it.
Right now.
This has been fun, Ben, but we gotta go.
Yeah, we got a movie to watch. Okay, well, what about let me try that again. The Exorcism of Emily Rose regarding, well, it's kind of based on... Annalise Michelle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What are your guys' thoughts, on that particular one? Because I personally had gripe with it for different reasons than I've ever heard anybody else.
It's a bad movie.
Yeah, I didn't really like it.
And I loved it.
Oh, did you?
I liked the movie. Yeah, but for the scare factor, it was more. It wasn't for the true story because the true story is just it's really sad.
Have you heard the audio from the actual case?
Yeah, I have.
It's disturbing.
Yes, it is. I mean,
whether or
the
not
actual,
it's a demon or if it's a psychological thing. I mean,
right.
it's just
I mean,
disturbing
she
to listen
spoke
to.
in 6 different languages that she should not have known. I mean, there's things that happened to this poor girl. I mean, anybody knows the case. She eventually died. She starved to death, and the trauma to her body and the everything she went through. I mean, it's a horrible story. And the movie was Hollywoodized, of course. But that's another one of those cases. Like, did they really need to Hollywoodize it? Because the actual case was.
And the priest went to prison. Yeah. I believe the priests that were involved, or some of the church officials, actually went to prison because the fact that she died while it happened, and
they didn't seek. They didn't seek the proper medical care for her that they should have.
Right.
They were treating it as an exorcism, so they were going to exorcise these demons out of her instead of getting her medical assistance, which they should have.
See, I was just thrown for a loop by the movie, and this is just my own personal gripe with it, was, I went in it wanting to watch a horror movie.
So like a Rob Zombie flick?
Oh, shut up. You're never going to let me live that down.
No, sir.
Half of the movie was a courtroom battle, and that really threw me off. And I really didn't care for that. And that was what really turned me off about the movie. Obviously, I was fascinated by the origin of the story with, Annalise and what happened to her. But, I was expecting a horror movie.
Was that was it a case was that in Germany that this happened?
Where she was from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe so. Yeah. So, that was kind of a big turnoff for me. And most everybody I've ever talked to,
Exception of me.
No, most people I've talked to have always liked the movie. I know a fair amount of people that don't like it just because of how grossly exaggerated it became, but there were elements to it I thought were done well, scare factors, especially like out in the barn scene and things like that.
I think with every movie, like I watch horror movies all the time. I love horror movies since I was a little kid. We've watched horror movies. And I think the only movies that ever really get to me are the exorcism movies. Exorcist and that genre is the one movie that gives me a little, and which I don't get from most. I mean, people watch horror movies to get that little. So I think with me, that's probably part of why I liked it, was because when it actually did get to that part, it was kind of the movie that was like, for me.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's how I am. The Exorcist, hands down, is the scariest movie for me. To this day, I have an overactive imagination too, so that whole stairs.
You're sitting there,
scene,
that could happen.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised Catholic, so I'm like, oh God.
I'm just afraid to look in the mirror and see Captain Howdy back.
Yeah.
I don't want to see that. Pazuzu.
But what I really enjoy, so I understand a lot of the movies are sensationalized and over the top and a little out there, but I really enjoy sometimes watching movies and saying like, that's cool that they did that. Like in The Conjuring, when they show the setup and show them sitting there at the table and not doing anything and just have the headphones on and they're listening.
Right.
That's realistic. I like that. I like that they're putting that kind of stuff in. And then you go to, I think, what is it, like Insidious? Is that the one where the clairvoyant comes in with her team?
Insidious.
Oh, yes.
And they're these two totally
they're
dorky
great.
guys, and you're just like,
I
are
love
you
Insidious, too.
serious? No, I love the movie, but the guys walk in and
I
you're
love
like,
that trilogy.
really?
Really?
Yeah, I enjoyed the Insidious trilogies as well. I think it's kind of funny that they really made those guys to be so nerdy and.
Well, and again, I think that's how Hollywood kind of portrays a lot of us.
Yeah,
is either
that's what I was
nerdy
saying.
or complete buffoons. The list
And
is
there was a little
endless.
bit of the buffoon effect going on with them.
Yeah.
You know, they had that dynamic in there, but yeah, I agree. You know, great set of movies.
But they don't do that just with paranormal investigators. They do that with clairvoyants and stuff,
Yeah, because
too.
she was pretty over the top. Too.
She was. And
I
you
love
look
the
at that,
gas
and
mask.
you're looking at Poltergeist and her, I forget her name, but she.
Ruben.
Zelda
yeah,
she
she
was
was a
very
creepy
Yeah.
little lady.
She had a very large personality.
But then you have stuff like Ghost, and there's Whoopi Goldberg, and she's like over the top and totally a charlatan who turns out not to really be one. And then, you know, like even in American Horror Story,
Oh, yeah.
the Roanoke House, they had a psychic come out. He seemed totally legit. I really liked his character. And then he turns around, he's like, I'm going to charge you $10,000 to come help you. I'm like, oh, yay.
Cha-ching.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What about the Bye Bye Man? I mean, that was the best.
You were the only one.
I saw your
I've never
review.
seen it. You watched it for
You
us.
tell us about that one, Michael.
Didn't you shut that off too?
Oh, yeah.
He went
but it
bye-bye.
was just, well, actually, I watched a good portion of it, realizing how bad it was. And I find a lot of these movies that are supposed to be scary, I'm not scared at just because they're so ridiculous. But on the other hand, I have found movies that most people did not find scary that horrified me.
Like Showgirls.
Like love stories?
The Blob with Steve McQueen. That is an excellent alien invasion movie because it's coming to the planet and it does not have a plan of anything other than just surviving by eating, and whatever it happens to be.
What about the stuff?
Perfect. Especially the opening line where the guy sticks his finger in the goo and licks it. It's
Wow.
food. Yeah, that was a great one.
And they make movies so over the top now, and I don't know if it's what's going on in society now. News is so horrible that they're trying to over. Because if you think some of the movies that we used to watch back when we were kids, they weren't all that gory, but they were. They were scary. They were scary, and it wasn't just because we were kids. I mean, they had something fear factor in it now that a lot of the movies aren't doing anymore. And like I said, I just don't know if now we're just more desensitized. Thank you.
Words are hard.
Words are very hard, especially on day 3 of a ghost conference.
Right.
Or if it's what it is now that they think everything, like the Saw trilogy or the Saw line, which now there's like 6. Those movies are horrible. The Hostel movies.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just so over the top, extreme gore that they're not even scary. It's just disgusting.
Yeah, I can't sit in my seat, still watching those because I'm just like, oh, Jesus, what's going on?
What about Human Centipede?
Oh, no, don't. No.
No.
So, do you have a haunting on your list to talk about?
We can totally talk about
Yeah,
that.
we can totally talk about
The
that.
1960s version, yeah.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
I think that one got a lot of it right.
We
Yeah.
just showed that movie to our kids.
That movie's
Actually,
amazing.
It isn't a matter of if they got it right. It's that we're still doing the same exact stuff with just updated equipment.
Yeah.
Right.
And it shines a little bit of light on parapsychology, which I was really pleased with. But, I mean, it was
And the use of psychics.
The
Yeah.
psychics, they brought in, they had the scientists that came in, and then they had the parapsychologists that came in.
Yep.
And just the way they portrayed the activity. Like there was a scene in the bedroom. It's the best scene in the whole movie when the psychic is laying on her bed, and then all of a sudden you've got like all of these things going on around her.
Right.
And it's
That's
interesting.
a great movie.
And you think that was 1960s. In those days, they didn't show a lot of the blood and gore on TV, so they actually had to come up with good material that they could use,
Right.
without making it overly gory. I mean, because really, The Exorcist was the first movie that came out that was like, that was really and that's not even gory, really. I mean, if you think about it.
In the grand scheme of things.
Right, but movies back, early 70s and before, they actually had to come up with good movie lines and good. Couldn't
So they
just
had
rely
to
on
have
special
writers.
effects. Yeah, they had to have writers. It wasn't just.
What a concept.
No, and as Ben said, like we have 2 little kids, and we showed that to them. I don't show them scary movies because they are so over the top and gory or scary for no reason. And so he's like, let's show him this one. And I was like, okay. And they did really well with it.
Oh, they were glued to the TV, and that tells you a great movie that stands the test of time, especially for what we're talking about today, Hollywood and the paranormal. They're a dime a dozen, but they're not even worth a penny half the time.
And it was nice because it opened a dialogue. So they saw some things that didn't scare them and they wanted to go running for their rooms. They
Yeah.
could watch the whole thing. We can talk about it, and it's introducing them into this in a way that's a little softer and more realistic. Because, they ask us sometimes, like, do you really go and see ghosts and do things fly at you? And no, honey, like, that's not a reality necessarily. Like, so this...
I don't know about you, it happens to me all the time.
Oh, because I throw it at you, probably.
I'm a little bummed though because I think kids nowadays are a little too smart because they're too connected to everything.
Yeah.
It's like YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, blah blah blah. I remember showing my kids Jaws for the first time.
Oh, we did that
And
too.
this was probably I think last year, and there was the scene where Scheider's throwing the chum out into the ocean, and then you see Jaws like up close for the very first time, and Declan looks at me and he goes, "That's not real." It's like, dude, come on.
That's not real, but ours in our house is, but that could happen.
Right. Right.
So it's kind of that superficial knowledge of what really exists.
Right.
Prevents them from experiencing the same thing, the same depth that
Right.
everyone
Right.
else.
Or just enjoying it, even.
Yeah.
Just enjoy it at face
I was
value.
like, when I was a kid, watching Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it scared the hell out of me.
Mm-hmm.
But that was because you had people who you normally trusted who are now something completely different.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, you look at a lot of the films that were looking at even an exorcism type of film that's the same basic premise.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very frightening, but maybe not so much now.
Well, you look at like when Orson Welles did his radio show, the War of the and it caused a mass panic.
Actually, it didn't.
It didn't.
In all actuality, it was listened to by very few people. It's just that after it had been done, it was publicized
That it had
what
caused.
it had caused such a massive panic, which was good for Orson Welles, so that he could eventually produce
Alternative
probably
facts.
one of the
See?
best films ever.
Now, if I was a kid, I would have Googled that and
Silence.
silence.
How are we doing
This
on time?
conveys well
Oh,
on the radio,
yeah.
doesn't it?
We're doing all right. I think we got about 10 more minutes. I was sitting here just trying to think of another movie.
20.
20 minutes.
We're going to 50, right?
2:45, I thought.
20 minutes.
Is it
Come on,
2:45?
man. I don't know. We'll go until Pete makes us stop. But another movie I enjoyed for a horror movie perspective, and I think is fitting for
Is it
the
Halloween?
topic. No, is The Right. I have the book. I never read it. I'm just going to be honest.
That's my husband, everyone.
Yeah, I got other books I want to read. Playboy's got a lot of good articles, but it obviously talks about the possession again, and the whole demonic topic comes up obviously as a huge piece to this movie, but I always wondered why Anthony Hopkins, of all people, because I love him so much, why he would choose to jump into a role like that.
Wasn't he in Magic?
No.
I've never seen
I
that
don't
one.
think so.
I think he was a young Anthony Hopkins in that
That was
movie.
Anthony Perkins.
Anthony Perkins. In Magic?
I'm just throwing Anthony's around.
Yeah.
But no, I only bring that up because Magic was a horror film.
Yeah, I never saw that one.
And he did Audrey Rose as well. Right?
That was Catherine Hepburn.
You get those two mixed up all the
I thought it
time.
was Boots Randolph.
Audrey Rose was a good show.
So, thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
What about the
Thank
movie
you,
The
Jen.
Strangers? That was a good one.
Yeah, that was, if I remember right, it's been a while since, I love the movie, first off. I really enjoyed that. It took a very creepy setting and made it kind of horrifying, especially from a home invasion type perspective. But if I remember correctly, wasn't it about some murders that took place in California?
Yeah, it was based loosely. What they always say, this is based loosely. Like, this was based like the loosest extreme you could probably
Yeah,
get. It
really
was about
loosely.
a murder that had taken place in a cabin of a girl, or a couple girls, I believe, or a couple of young kids. And then they turned it into the movie, which is totally not that, but that's what they went on. But I think from a psychological point of view, I mean, that was another one of those ones. My husband said it was the scariest movie he'd ever seen.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and just because of the fact of the vulnerability
Yeah.
of being out there in the woods. And I think from his, being out there, he was looking at it from, I guess, the male point of view. Like, you're out there and you're being attacked by this. You don't know where it's coming. These people are all trying to home invasion you, and you've got no way to protect your wife. You've got no way to, and then the end result, for anybody who hasn't seen it, I won't blow the ending, but yeah, it wasn't good. So
Yeah, we probably should have started off saying spoiler alerts, maybe.
spoiler alert!
For some of you that, well, it's too
Like
bad,
years.
but you're going to learn about the movies now.
But I think that's one of those psychological movies where it wasn't really a ton of gore, but it was more psychological fear
Yeah.
that could hit certain people's fears.
Yeah, Hollywood has that kind of magic where it can take a plot that could be really scary and then turn it around and actually turn it into a comedy or something along that line. Two brothers who are actually sent to an insane asylum, even though they're not insane.
Or brothers.
And then they finally get to play hockey for the Elsinore Brewery. I mean, it
Take a
could
hike.
be a horror film.
Take a hike,
but
you hoser.
That sounds like a horror film to me.
Max von Sydow film, I highly recommend it. It Hell House LLC or something along that line. It was a little hokey, but it was done somewhat well too at the same time. So I actually got some enjoyment out of it and made it through to the end.
Right. What about a movie like that particular one, let's say? What about it is what you're pulling from it that you're like, yeah, this is a good movie? Is it just entertainment value only?
It's a balance. The entertainment value is pretty much paramount, but there's a lot in that. Is it believable? When a person is speaking to another person, is that something that really a normal person would say? Or,
Right.
Is the character likable? Because the characters that are not likable that get offed in any movie, who cares? So, I mean, they actually have to take some time to finesse a character that people will enjoy and actually care about.
Right.
Right.
I care about whether or not this person is.
You're invested.
Exactly.
Okay.
Casey, you were saying, if it's done right, you like them. Is there a movie you feel has been done right? As far as the found footage or... Okay.
There's been a few sprinkled here and there that I liked. There was a movie about a bunch of people that went out to like their uncle's cabin, no cell service or anything. Well, it turns out that they had like trampled through like a nesting area for Bigfoot.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
And it's basically them, fighting for their life. It was done really well. Complete BS, but it was a fun movie.
Yeah, was that called Evidence or something like that?
It was. I don't know. It
remember
kind of
that
had
one.
that Boggy Creek feel, but on a way higher production value, and not as schlocky.
Yeah.
Ooh, schlock. There you go. We can talk about that one.
Talk about
It's
it.
a horrible movie.
All right, and then we're done. Moving on. Well, I think actually we're kind of running out of time at this point. I was going to open it up real quickly to see if anybody in the audience had a question they want to pose. The way we'll kind of do it is if you do have a question, I'll have to kind of relay your question back over the mic so we can record what the question was. Does anybody have a question or would like to bring up a movie that they feel fits in here?
Jay Verberg,
I
you're
have a
going to be
question.
banned.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the other day you were talking, or you posted something about a George C. Scott movie that you really enjoyed, but I was wondering why you really enjoyed that.
The Changeling?
Do you not like that movie?
Great movie.
Love that movie. I just like the whole storyline is what it boils down to. A man and his family, and he loses his family and decides to completely relocate and ends up getting kind of hooked up through an association of his and gets put in this gorgeous, vacant mansion, and things start happening. And he's trying to bit and piece the story, figure the puzzle out. And as time goes on, he's putting two and two together, and he's discovering the reality of what took place in that home. And I've always been a big fan of that movie.
It's
And
got
it's
George C.
suspenseful.
Scott,
Yeah,
too.
George C. Scott is.
As a badass music composer.
Yeah, like I think he was really playing in that movie too, and smoking those cigarettes at the same time. That's skill.
Yeah. He had
Like a
four
lounge singer.
hands.
Then there was one that was made around the same time frame. The Ghost, what was it called? Ghost Story, with the guys that reflecting on when they were younger, and that one's a really good psychological.
I was just going to say that, Jay.
Ghost Story.
Well, the reason I brought that up is because there was, that is a film also that I enjoyed.
Okay.
So that is an excellent example of how Hollywood can kind of do in this particular case, like a paranormal mystery correctly. Where you kind of care about that.
But you know the story behind the Changeling.
No.
The gentleman who wrote the book that the movie was based on claimed that everything in the book that made it into film was true and was his own experience. That he took a house to write in, found the secret room, found the diary, went and found the amulet and all that kind of stuff. That essentially everything that he had written was true. If you sort of like the Amityville Horror, go back and you look at the details of that, things don't match up, names don't match up, addresses don't match up.
Right.
And then he said, yes, but they threatened me, so I had to change the names. I had to change the locations, so we still don't know.
Good. Everything you said. Just
Yeah, I was just going to say, I can't repeat what you just said.
Not as
You're
eloquently.
too smart for me, first off. And secondly, that was a lot more than I could remember.
I didn't even know it was supposed to be based on a true story, so there you go. I just thought it was a great movie.
Yeah.
But actually having that personal connection and somebody actually staying true to what was written, which was changed to protect the innocent or not so innocent, in this case, that actually probably is what carried through that movie to actually make people who have very different tastes in movies actually enjoy it.
Okay.
So does anybody have any questions or anything that they want to offer up?
Mr. Curtis.
The movie As Above, So Below, I heard that they actually got permission to film in the catacombs. Do you know if that's true or not?
I heard the same
I heard
thing.
that.
So, Jay, if you didn't come across the mic, which you probably did because you're a loud mouth, but yeah, he was just mentioning that as above, so below, they may have gotten permission to film in the catacombs. It looked like it from many shots that they did, and I heard the same thing, but I've never done any research to find out if they in fact were down there. I do believe that the catacombs now allow people to
there are public areas that you can access, just like you would go into the Shanghai tunnels.
Just where,
There's small
the
portions.
gravity is reversed?
Yes.
That area is okay?
It's the upside down.
Yeah. I thought I heard something about people being allowed to actually do investigations or stay the night down there.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Again, another avenue for money for them. Anybody else with a question or a comment?
Much of Hollywood's profitability these days comes from foreign markets. So a lot of what they're filming has to be over the top, big, bold, not a lot of dialogue, so that it can be shown in other markets where English is not the first language. But I'm wondering, on the flip side of that, do you guys know of any foreign films on the paranormal topic?
Ooh,
Yeah.
yes.
And it's just something that just occurred to me. I am not aware of one, but I was wondering if any of you was.
Just to recap, what was said is that a lot of movies are here in America, but they're for foreign audiences, so we have to go big and over the top. Are there any foreign films?
Actually,
that
it's
do
kind of
paranormal?
reversed. A lot of the films that come out of Hollywood were originated overseas. So, I mean, there was a vampire movie about a little girl.
Left
Let
behind.
the right one in,
No,
or something like that.
Let the right one in.
Yes.
It was
Oh, yeah.
the title was different overseas, and I watched, and I want to say it was a Norwegian or Swedish film. That was a great film. The American version, horrible. I mean, so many times. I mean, and not just in the horror and paranormal related genres, comedies. The Dinner Game from France. I watched that movie. I've seen it at least 10 times. I roll on the floor laughing every single time. The Americans redid that here. It was called Dinner for Schmucks, and it was horrible.
Interesting.
One of my all-time favorite foreign horror movies, done by a little art house director named Guillermo del Toro,
Just a little
is
one.
The Devil's Backbone.
Oh, yeah.
And the setting is the Spanish Civil War at this orphanage for children, and there's this ghost that's showing up in front of the children. I can't remember if it was in front of a lot of the adults, but what ended up transpiring is you're following these kids as they're trying to figure out who this kid is they keep seeing. And the way that he's portrayed is it's brilliant, because like if you look at the newest Pirates of the Caribbean and Javier Bardem's character, he died in the water, so his hair's kind of flowing as if he's in water. Well, the ghost in this movie is very similar, and it turns out that they end up. Well, actually, I'm not going to give it away. Watch it; it's great. It's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, and it's I think it was one of his first movies. He did Kronos, and then I believe Devil's Backbone was the second one that he did. And it's just done.
Orphanage. I was
is
just going to
great
bring
too,
that up. I love that movie. Very good. Yeah. Anybody else with a question or comment? Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you guys very much for attending, and Michael, Kristen, Casey, thank you guys for being a part of ASEP Radio.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Now we're all like getting our cars. Yeah.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
There are people who have reported experiencing the same things that we have been experiencing.
I hear the brush popping and stuff. Oh, there he goes. Jesus.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.